Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rafae Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be deliberating on two very important topics, and we'll be deliberating on these segments. In the first segment we'll be talking about the OIC summit and Israeli strikes on Gaza. In that regard, we know that the 15th session of the Islamic Summit Conference was held in Banjul, the Republic of Gambia, in which 57 member states took part. The theme of this year's summit was enhancing unity and solidarity through dialogue for sustainable development. If we talk about the agenda of this summit, it was the Pakistan agenda, which the Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar and the Deputy Prime Minister of the country, Ishaq Dar, talked about the situation in Gaza and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. He also raised the issue of Islamophobia, and in which Pakistan urged the OIC member states to formulate a joint strategy to combat Islamophobia globally. They also talked about working together for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. And regarding the OIC summit, the Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar also held bilateral meetings with other participating partners. In the second segment, we'll be talking about the elections in a neighboring country, India, and of course we'll also be talking about the BJP and Modi's politics of hatred there. We know there's been a lot of election campaigning in India. We see at one end there's the BJP with its anti-Muslim ideology, and it is promoting that narrative throughout India. We saw the inauguration of the Ram Mandir, the Citizenship Amendment Act, and we also heard different chants and slogans regarding anti-Muslim sentiments, such as calling Muslims as invaders and intruders. On the other hand, we have the Congress party that has a grand alliance and that has called for restoring the democratic and secular fabric of India and has shunned the politics of BJP. In today's show, we'll be discussing the two very important topics. In the studios, we've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and we've also been joined by Raja Faisal, who is a geopolitical analyst. On Skype, we have been joined by Dr. Jamil Ahmed, who's a former ambassador. I'd like to thank you all for your time and being part of the show. Starting off our conversation with Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan regarding the OIC summit and regarding the Israeli strikes in Gaza. A former ambassador, we know, and this has been talked about time and time again. There's been calls for a ceasefire. There's been action at the ICJ by South Africa. There's also been talks at the United Nations. There's international calls mounting and mounting. There's ongoing protests that are going on, calling for a ceasefire and calling for an end to the offensive that Israel is carrying out against the Gazan population. What more can be done, and how could these actions by the Israeli regime be stopped or put an end to, and how can more emphasis be put on these calls for a ceasefire? As we know that there's been mounting calls, but Israel hasn't been heeding to any of these.
Yes, sir. In fact, we should admit and we should recognize the handicaps which most of the countries of the world have, including the OIC members, 57 countries, that a clear-cut decision and clear-cut resolution cannot be adopted about the boycott of Israel. So there's no such mention in the declaration of the summit, 15th summit. Whatever best could have been done under these circumstances, where the countries have influence of geopolitical considerations. So under those influence and of course the pressure, they could this what they could say. Let me also draw the attention of your viewer that the OIC and its very first article, it indicates an article, once I'm saying first article, the article number 1, and its 12th section, it says the humanitarian emergency. What could be a bigger humanitarian emergency than the Palestine, the Gaza people who are suffering? Almost about 2 million people. They are almost going to die of famine if this continue with that. And then Article 1 and its subsection 8, it says that the support and empower Palestinian people, establish sovereign state. Pakistan was quite vocal. Pakistan once again emphasized and underscored that Palestinian should get the membership, and they should have their own sovereign state. But what could be the implementing tools of all these resolutions which you mentioned in your intro? There are more than about 600 six resolutions which has been passed since 7th of October, but hardly anyone has been implemented, and none has been implemented with regard to the ceasefire and permanent humanitarian pause. And I would also draw the attention of your viewer about Article 18 of the OIC. And then Article 18 is very clear that, first of all, in the preamble, Article 1, it mentions about the Palestine, and I'm going to build that argument for what kind of a declaration was issued by OIC, this 15th summit. So the other point which I want to highlight here is that there is a specific article which mentioned that OIC would have a dedicated assistant secretary general who would only work for the cause of Palestine and also ensure that all the resolutions which has been passed are implemented through the efforts of these summits, whether it's a summit under Article 8, the head of states, or whether or it's a summit under Article 9, which is the common of the Council of Foreign Minister, or extraordinary session, which took place last year in November in regard to the Palestinian problem. But now, what is the bottom line? Including this summit, we were not, the resolution was not as strong as it should have been. In fact, Pakistan was quite vocal in the in the General Assembly. Pakistan's permanent representative representing Pakistan had used the word of genocide in Palestine. But those kind of wordings have not been used here. Rather, the emphasis and the theme is altogether, it's enhancing unity and solidarity, and which automatically implies that solidarity with whom? The Muslim Ummah, the member states, the people, the minorities. So they did mention about Palestine, but if the resolution or the declaration would have contained one of the paras indicating that we will boycott Israel, we will not allow our airspace to be used by Israel, will not allow our airspace to carry the weapon for Israel from various countries. So that would have been a different ballgame. But as I said, that as per the geopolitical intricacies, that countries are slightly careful about giving this kind of a statement or attributing to this kind of a declaration. So yes, this session took place, and we appreciate that. They did mention about Islamophobia. They did mention about the sustainable development of. They did mention about the social, cultural, and harmonization of various countries. All those things have been have been discussed, and they did mention about the global issues, particularly situation in Palestine. But they just discussed. They did not really take any action or any decision which could be actionable. So that is one thing which we must admit. In fact, those things which could be actionable, like the South Africans, they did it. Like some North African American countries, they did it. In fact, none of the member state of the OIC was able to do it. However, we were quite clear in our thoughts. Our foreign minister, he in para 14, it is mentioned resolve long-standing dispute of Palestine and Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So that was at least adopted, that was at least incorporated in the declaration, which seems quite positive development so far Kashmir is concerned. But at least we were able to raise this point even for Palestine, which Pakistan was able to do that. And then the declaration mentioned about, and of course, the credit goes to Pakistan with regard to the Security Council resolution, which was spearheaded by Pakistan, Turkey, and also one or two more countries, including Saudi Arabia, and the tributes were passed to them. These were some of those salient features, but I was trying to find out that despite the fact that OIC very clearly underscores the cause of Palestine, but at least they should have relied on the Security Council resolution in which it was the ceasefire was demanded and Israel didn't really. And as we are talking, as we are progressing in our debate today, the Israelis, they are all set to invade, are all set to again conduct door-to-door or door-to-door operation in Rafah. And this place where they are going to go, perhaps tonight, the way the Israeli troops have already announced that they should vacate. This is the 15th time that the Palestinians, they move from one place to another place. On the announcement of the Israeli troops, they are bombarded there. They are asked to move again to another place. This is the 15th time they are moving from this location, and now this would also be raided, and the door-to-door operation, it appears, would. The entire world is, with one voice, is demanding that it should not happen. But Israel is determined to do that because Israel knows that they would have the support of the Security Council. Anything which is detrimental to the intention, I would say, not even interest, intention of Israel, that would be vetoed. So just because of this reason that they are carrying forward. But there has to be some logic. There has to be some reason that why the biggest supporter of Israel has not been able to influence Israel, that is US, not been able. Joe Biden, yesterday was a second time that he spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu, asking him to avoid such kind of an operation where the innocent human lives are lost, and take all the precautions. And these are the wordings which Joe Biden has used a couple of times. Avoid take all the protective measures to ensure that the innocent lives are not lost in that. But beyond that, if they wanted, they could have moved their warships, which are surrounding Gaza. If they wanted, they could have given a final warning to the Israel. But we understand, and the world understands, that what pressure the United States has, that they are facing the students, such a huge protest in all the campus. They have faced the protest all over the country, not only US, other countries also, but we're talking about the US. But still, they are not been able to take them and a very clear decision to influence Israel or to ask Israel that the US would not support if they do not listen to the US in this case. But it's not going to happen, because we have to understand that the Zionist lobby, and it's not me who's saying that, so many researchers and analysts of the internationally have already mentioned that because of the lobby, which is so well engrossed in the Congress, in the financial system, in the administrative system, in the media system, that it becomes very hard for the US government or US leadership to take a decision which goes against the legal or illegal, I would say mostly illegal, interest of Israel. And the clear cut.
Right, Dr. Jamil, of course, an action needs to be taken, and there's the situation is going spiraling out of control as there are protests erupting in the United States as well, one of the biggest ally of Israel. Raja Faisal, what's your views regarding as Dr. Jamil, he mentioned the operation in Rafah. There's even the United States, who's the biggest ally of Israel, has asked them not to go forward with it, as it would be a catastrophe, a humanitarian catastrophe what would go there, as there's almost more than 1 million displaced Palestinian population that is in Rafah city at the moment. What's your take on it, and how could Israel be further stopped, because it is, as far as we know, it is signaling towards continuing with its operation in Rafah?
Yeah, obviously, Rafae, if we look at the current situation of Gaza, it is obviously dire situation right now, and of course world is still waiting for the time when they can intervene. And to me, I think they could have intervened right at the time when actually it started, because on one side we can see that there is a military might. Israel is a well-known military might, one of the top 10 military mights of the world. It must be considered. And on the other side, it's merely the innocent people who have nothing to defend themselves, and that is why we saw that the whole Gaza Strip, one by one, they actually categorized Israelis. They categorized the portions of it, and one by one, all of the portions, they were carpet bombed, and they were, of course, the indiscriminate bombing took place, and we saw that they were all of the population was dragged to Rafah. Rafah is a border crossing, and it's a very small stretch of land where all of the migrants within Gaza, they have actually relocated themselves there, and now Israelis, they are of course thinking about bombing that place as well. They would not be having anywhere to go. People of Gaza, either they can jump in the Mediterranean and they can present themselves in protest in front of whole world. That world couldn't do anything for humanity. That is why in protest they can simply finding no space on the world, they present themselves to the Mediterranean. This option, and the second option they have, of course, which Israel wants that as well. Why I say this? Because I was part of one of the debates on an international channels, and that took place on 11th of October. And in that debate, of course, the debater who was sitting in the debate from Tel Aviv, he himself said it that day, that why can't all of the Gazans, they can be moved to Sinai Desert, and they can be moved from there, and of course they can vacate Gaza, and of course we can take over Gaza. And I said to him at that time, it's a war crime because it's ethnic cleansing which is taking place, and that is what is actually happening. And now when we are seeing that Americans, they are merely giving the statements and not doing a lot to stop whatever the menace is going on, and it's a genocide which is going on, and still we are seeing that Secretary Blinken and his associates, they are speaking in favor of Israel, and they're not speaking in favor of humanity right now. Earlier we were talking about OIC, in a environment where we should be expecting something coming out of OIC, that ideally I would have been thinking that there should have been invitation to Foreign Minister of South Africa, number one, and there should have been an invitation, special invitation to few of the Western countries. I must say Norway played an excellent role in recent times, and if we talk about Portugal and then Spain, their governments, they have been speaking in favor of humanity. And if we talk about Ireland, they have been very vocal. They have even took out all of the investments which are made in the Israeli banks and Israeli companies. They have took that out, and same Norway has done the same as well. And we shouldn't be forgetting that Norway played a pivotal role in of course maintaining peace in Palestine, and of course in between Palestine and Israel. We know that Oslo Accord is there, but it is not being respected by Israel, and that is why we are seeing that Norway is standing and speaking in favor of armless people of Gaza, armless people of Palestine, and they are constantly doing that. OIC,
call them unarmed.
Yeah, unarmed. These countries, they should have been specially invited to this OIC, because one thing which we are forgetting is that whenever we see OIC having these kind of summits, it is taken as one religion is of course bringing all of their countries, and of course in that summit they are only talking about Islam. And at this hour, when we talk about Gaza, this catastrophe is not only a Muslim catastrophe, it is a humanitarian crisis which is being faced by the world itself, and the countries that were involved. Of course, if we talk about Naledi Pandor, Foreign Minister of South Africa, she was vocal. She was the one who actually went to International Criminal Justice, and she of course took Israel to cleaners. And if we talk about the Western countries, they have been so vocal against Israel in favor of humanity, in favor of Gaza. Of course, this should have been taken as a positive, and this time around these countries should have been invited specially, and they should have been given the podium, so that this time around OIC's voice could have been heard beyond the borders, not only the Muslim countries, but of course throughout the United Nations countries and throughout the Security Council countries and all of the countries. And one more thing, China should have been invited as well. We shouldn't be forgetting that last week's statement from Chinese side, it was an excellent statement. In the midst of madness which is going on in Gaza, their statement that they are ready to offer rebuild Gaza once the war is over. I mean, this should have been taken very positively, and to me, I think Chinese delegation should have been invited specially as well, because we have to invite more and more people in the OIC so that it doesn't get the tag of just the Islamic countries. It should be considered a humanitarian crisis now.
It is called OIC.
Yeah.
Organization of Islamic
Yeah, but a
countries.
special invitation this time around.
No, you were
looking
talking
at
about
the
avoiding the tag of Islam, so this
Yeah.
is what I was pointing out.
Yeah,
They
and-
have to actually work according to their own charter.
Yeah, they have to, but of course, this time around, just because of Gaza, they should have,
They could have expanded their scope, what you're trying to say.
They should have done that.
All right, very rightly put. Farrukh, Pitafi, what's your views considering the whole situation in Gaza? We see that on one hand, the Palestinians' United Nations membership was set aside. On the other hand, we're seeing the signals towards the Rafah operation, and of course, even US, Israel's biggest ally, has cautioned it not to advance with this offensive, but it's still signaling that it's going to do this.
Yeah, regarding the U.S. and treaties and requests regarding not going ahead with this kind of operation, there are two reports that kept on circulating. One is that behind the scenes, of course, in public, and I'm going to explain why. In public, they are going to actually just resort to request, but the word has it that the U.S. government is really leaning on Netanyahu to not go ahead. That means using all the diplomatic and perhaps other pressures as well. The other reports came day before yesterday that there was a shipment of American weapons that were to be delivered to Israel, but the U.S. government on the last moment actually stopped it. So I don't have any way to actually verify either of these reports. But I want to actually, deconstruct and kind of build on what was discussed regarding OIC. I think that whenever such crises take place, of course, being vocal is good. And vocal is good because people like me, Faisal, others who are sitting this far away from the actual epicenter of what is going on, we can feel good and get some kind of gratification, but we can't do anything, right? The fact is that when it comes to a messy kind of situation, where one country has clear edge diplomatically, economically, militarily, and narrative-wise, there other bodies might have impact, but those bodies need to work patiently. And I'm talking about IGOs. OIC is one of such examples. The other is UN. The problem is that every time something of this sort happens, we immediately start expecting political things from these bodies. Politics because of the UNSC and the fact that all these countries that are in OIC are united, but they are independent countries and they have to have their own national interest. And it becomes very complicated to navigate through all of those differences and find a direction. Luckily, there is a direction and that, charging ahead. But the actual USP, Rafae, of these organizations is particularly in social sector, especially given that there are millions of people who are starving in Gaza. So finding a way to supply, and this is where the UN has been failing as well, because all of a sudden Israeli government came out and started accusing, you know, a few officials of its body that delivers or supplies rations to the Palestinians as terrorists, and after that, you know how much messy situation was.
Yes.
But I wanted to actually then also speak about, Dr. Saab was talking about, you know, Zionist lobby. So let us call it Israeli lobby, because Dr. John Mearsheimer has written a beautiful book on that. And it is really a good book to understand how Israel operates. And it is called Israeli Lobby. But then there is another documentary that was made in 2016, and it is called by a leftist professor, but the movie is, the documentary is called Occupation of American Mind. So the story goes like this. Immediately after the Six-Day War between Arabs and Israel, Israel found out that in America, American media is portraying Israel as the offender and others as the victims. So all of a sudden they had a rethink, and they came up with many manipulations that were possible. One, they started the Ministry of Hasbara, or propaganda. Right? I mean, you keep on talking about Holocaust, and now you're borrowing their terminology. So on the other side, that propaganda ministry, and then they started investing in the lobby that Dr. Mearsheimer also talks about. And I know that you want me to actually conclude very quickly, but I just wanted to actually point out that well-intended movements or expressions of you know, rights movements like BDS, that is banned, diverse and sanctioned movement, they are being portrayed as terrorists by Netanyahu. Now all of a sudden this Western approach that Netanyahu has done something new is baffling to me. We knew who he is. We knew that he is baying for Palestinian blood. He uses Gaza as a laboratory to experiment with his new anti-so-called terrorism weaponry, and by perfecting that he exports that elsewhere, including the US and India, right? With that kind of monster in charge of a country, then you have the gall to call the country, you know, a democracy. It has just shut down Al Jazeera, right, in Israel. The only pair of eyes that were there to report how brutal the situation was. And yet they keep on calling them democracy. And there lies the actual rub. You are so compromised that a country, a tin pot little, you know, Asian or African country can actually get away with any kind of manipulation because you have allowed it so much power over you.
Well, sums it up very well, but we hope sanity prevails and there's some quarters that can actually put a stop to the nefarious designs that this so-called democracy is trying to pursue. With that, we'll have to move towards the next segment when we'll talk about the Indian elections, and of course, we'll be talking about the Modi's politics of hatred. We know whenever there's talk of elections in India, the anti-Pakistan narrative, the anti-Muslim narrative, the BJP's Hindutva narrative, we see it on a whole new rise. And in this regard, when we're talking about these elections in India, we saw the inauguration of the Ram Mandir, we saw the Citizenship Amendment Act, and then we saw speeches in which the whole Muslim population of India were called intruders or invaders. Dr. Jamil, what's your take on this politics of hatred? And of course, considering that there's a grand alliance that is in opposition of the Modi regime, the BJP regime at the moment.
Like what we were discussing in the first segment, to understand why Israel is doing what they are doing now, that they have unleashed all kind of atrocities and killed journalists and killed people, about 35,000. Likewise in India, we have to understand that what is the RSS movement and the BJP government is an offspring of RSS. As a matter of fact, even the Prime Minister of India, from the age almost 14, 15 years that he's been a member there, so that Hindutva ideology and that very policy is being taught that all the minorities are being marginalized. And it's not me who is saying that. It has already been mentioned in the United States two reports, which is the Religious Freedom Report, and they have very clearly dilated upon it. But again, why India is not really paying any heed to it, whether it's Kashmir, more than about 7, 8 resolutions, it doesn't listen to it. And like Israel doesn't listen to any of the resolutions. And I was very confident that once resolution number 2712 was passed on 15th November to halt the aggression of Israel, and Israel totally declined that, I knew that they are not going to do that and what support they have. Likewise, the election is one kind of a golden opportunity for the BJP to exploit and do that same rat trick of saying everything against Pakistan, and they're doing that. It's basically more of a political campaign, although there has been always some problem with the BJP government. And the world has already witnessed that what they have done, the kind of enactment which they have passed, whether it's the Citizens Act, or it's Citizens Register, or it's other enactments, what they have done in Kashmir, all these things, it does not, it is in conflict with international law. But since it has its geopolitical significance in the region, since the containment of China policy of the United States, India becomes a very important country in achieving that purpose. So all what they are doing is really not being taken notice of by the international community. Security Council resolutions are, even if some resolution is tabled by any other Security Council member, 99.99% it would be vetoed, like it happens in case of Israel, that all these resolutions which can give some relief to the Palestinian, either it's vetoed or it's not really heard. So coming back to the Indian election, like last time, they are using the same rhetoric time and again of meeting about the Bush related to Pakistan, all these allegations. And so that's how they are doing it. And I think they'll continue to do that till the time the entire process is complete. And afterward, probably some sanity would prevail. But we should expect that there would be any improvement in so far as the marginalization policy is concerned, because that's one of those fundamental aim and objective of the Hindutva ideology and the BJP policy adopted by BJP. So that seems to be continuing so long as India has its significance in the geopolitical scene of the region and the globe, particularly with regard to, as I said, the containment of China. And therefore, India has entered into some of the treaty, some of the agreement with the United States, which otherwise would never had happened, including Gujarat, the logistic support, although it's in the name of logistics, but there are so many other things which is happening around. And the first time India has allowed any other foreign entity or country to use those their seaport for the operational purpose, although it's called as logistic ports. And likewise, they have also entered into some of the agreements which empowers India in terms of collection of intelligence, in terms of their technological collaboration, in terms of their joint venture and producing the war weapons. So if we have all those factors in our mind, we will probably be drawing some conclusion that while India is scot-free, like Israel is scot-free, whatever they are doing. So India, whatever human right violation, what could be the bigger evidence against India than the two very volumetric Human Rights Commission report. The last report, which Human Rights Commission, it was over 100 pages, and which contains all the atrocities which has been unleashed and Kashmir, but again, nothing happened. And the Commissioner of Human Rights, once he was presenting that report and salient features of that report in front of the press, his tears started rolling out. But Pakistan had given 131 pages of dossier to United Nations. But again, because there are two faces of United Nations, we were discussing in the previous segment also, United Nations is a political wing, as well as United Nations has a secretariat wing. Secretariat wing, but what they are doing in Gaza, they are trying their best, so much so that the Secretary General was asked to resign by Israel. First time any member state has ever asked the Secretary General to resign. So they are so critical, and they've started labeling the allegation against the UN staff members. Yeah. So because of which the United Nations Secretariat wing, like UNRWA, they are not really that effective because Israel doesn't let them come in with their humanitarian aid. But the Security Council, which can always invoke Chapter 5 of the United Nations Charter or Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter against any country which is violating the Security Council resolution, but it's always vetoed because it's totally a political wing, and it is driven by the geopolitical environment and echo of the ecosystem of the entire world. So therefore, all these countries who have the veto power and have their own interest, in fact, they are the one they call the shot in United Nations. So normally we try and mix it up with the Secretariat, with the political wing, which is the Security Council resolution. Security Council resolutions,
that's a very point highlighted that you just did. It is something that emphasis should be laid on, of course, and these hegemonic designs should be stopped for there to be peace in the world, and there should be regional stability in the world, and for prosperity as a whole. With that, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, former ambassador. Thank you for your time and your insights. It was lovely to have you on the show. Raja Faisal, what's your views on the situation in India and the elections in India, considering what's happening there, the anti-Pakistan and anti-Muslim rhetoric? And of course, there's ideology versus ideology that we're seeing here. On the one hand, we see anti-Muslim ideology, and on the other hand, we see that the Congress is talking about the secularism and democratic nature of India and how it's being subdued by the BJP.
Yeah, Rafae, obviously, if we talk about not only the Indian politics or Israeli politics throughout the world, there are political terrorists who are obviously conducting their political terrorism through electoral terrorism. Whenever there is an election, even if it is a few of the countries of Europe, of course, their far rights. I don't know why being far right, it's a fashion nowadays that the being far right political parties, they have to be Islamophobic, they have to be hate-filled against the Islam. I mean, take many examples from within Western countries, European countries. Their far rights, as long as they are anti-Islam and they are Islamophobic, it's okay for them to be far right, and this is what is happening, and that's how they are gaining votes. They terrorize their own people with the kind of self-created ideas they have against the Islam.
Faisal, very quickly, question to you.
Yeah.
Why is that so?
It is because it's a fashion nowadays. I believe it's a fashion throughout the world because...
Can I give you a counter theory?
Yeah.
Just a quick. Because two far right governments, India and Israel,
They
which have been there for quite some time,
Yeah.
are normalizing it.
Thanks ever so much, Farrukh. And this was the brilliant reply. I don't know why I couldn't give it to you. If we take the example of Likud, Benjamin Netanyahu, as long as he's anti-Islam, as long as he's Middle Eastern Muslim countries, it's all okay to have the far right approach and win the election because he is very successful out there. Come to India, And in India is the same case. As long as you are anti-Muslim, who happen to be your largest minority of India, and as long as you are anti-Islam, anti-Muslims, anti-Islamic neighbor called Pakistan, it's all good and you are winning elections. These hate mongers, they are winning everywhere and it is becoming a fashion. That is why United Nations, they passed a resolution back in 2021 in which of course they highlighted 22 I must say in that resolution they did highlight that Islamophobic approach, it must be shunned, and this is what of course is taking place. And by the way, Western media plays a pivotal role and a very negative role, I must say, when it comes to, of course, Islamophobia.
And normalizing Modi.
And normalizing it. I mean, it's nothing to them. And this is what is taking place. This must end now. In today's India, of course, we are seeing that there is, a 24-party alliance, and they are fighting for their country's constitution to remain secular, their country to remain secular. But when it comes to Modi single-handedly, by generating hate within the society of India with the help of RSS ideology, they are winning. And that is why I kept on saying in recent times that it is so far it's looking as if Modi, he would be having a very smooth sailing towards another term. And why? Because as long as you are hating Muslims, it's normal.
Right. Farrukh Pitafi, same question, as you've been following the Indian elections and
very closely, and I think I will.
You have 5 minutes.
Muster 2 minutes for me.
5 minutes.
Okay.
I mustered 5 minutes from the producer for you.
Okay. So look, everything in India is politics, right? Because India is going through an election which is perhaps the longest election in the world. It continues for 46 days, right? It started on 19th of April. And it will continue till June 4th, when they will announce the results. So in this 7-phase election, India goes to vote tomorrow, right? The third phase is tomorrow. And amazingly, what we hear is that because something very interesting has happened. Look, you can keep on talking about secularism. India's problem is not secularism. The word secularism was added in Indian constitution late in 60s, right? What the constitution is about is taking care of all the people, right? Which is a very aspirational but realistic goal. So what it does, and the person who wrote it was a Dalit. Right. Now, India's Dalits are 15% of population. If you actually lump together OBC, other backward castes, it reaches over 50%. So and then keep on adding on other layers, and it goes to 60, 70, 80, and even Rahul Gandhi has been heard talking about 90%. So what happens right now? Ambassador Saab was talking about RSS. RSS is not a problem anymore. Somebody else is. India has this growing, capitalist class. These billionaires who have become billionaires of the world. Remember, Ambani's son's wedding was there, and who actually showed up and who did not. Right? Entire world was there. So they are so rich. Adani is another person who is of similar kind, and he has been expanding voraciously. Now he seemed to own everything in India. So whatever reservations are there, they stand, or reservations or quotas for the minorities or some kind of climate-related safeguards, they exist to ensure that people don't suffer. But these expansionist billionaires actually want to take over everything, right? So they have used a Trojan horse in Narendra Modi, and they have managed to rule India and the world for 10 years. The problem is this time it doesn't seem to be happening because A, there's anti-incumbency, but then the majority lower castes are actually standing up and fighting back, and that's why Modi fears that he's going to lose the election. So what has happened since then? After the first phase, by the way, he started the whole journey by being aspirational. No mention of Hindus or Muslims. 5 minutes haven't actually ended, by the way.
No, I was interested in what you were going to say.
Okay. So I'm timing it, remember?
Right.
But, you know, no mention of Muslims, no mention of Pakistan, no mention even of China at the start in his manifesto.
Yes.
But then came the first two phases, which actually accounted for 35% of the vote. And those two phases have shown that interest in his own voters is ebbing. So after that, he has gone totally berserk, accusing Congress of stealing Mangal Sutras of women. And then he has gone even to the extent that if you have two buffaloes, Congress is going to snatch one buffalo and give it to Muslims.
Right.
So with that kind of bonkers policy, what is happening? I'm sorry.
Well, start plus taken to the next level.
No, even more than that. I can't stop laughing.
Right.
But I mean, with that kind of total messy kind of narrative, it seems, by the way, they are very smart. They are very rich. They control all the media. Because of the biggest corruption scandal in the world ever, that is electoral bonds, they are very rich. And then they control everything. So right now what they are trying to do is use one party called BSP, Bahujan Samaj Party, a party which actually stands for Dalits. And they are using it against the India Alliance to cut their votes so that they can win. But the problem right now is every Dalit knows that if they come back and with Bahumat, that is majority, they are going to abolish the constitution and the reservations, and then Adani will build roads through your houses.
Right.
So because of that fear, I think that Modi is actually acting out of character, not very composed.
Well,
if he ever had one.
well, that's very rightly put, Raja Faisal. And with that, we'd like to sum up today's show. Of course, I'd like to thank both of our analysts, Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And we talked about the elections in India and we discussed different dynamics to it. And of course, we see that, we hope to see that the elections happen, and with the result we'll be seeing on 4th of June. That's all the time we have for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care.